One of the reasons why portrait painting is considered such a difficult subject is because the skin has many subtle tones that are grayed down in such a way that the naked eye has a hard time evaluating. There's nothing orange, blue, red, green. There are only grayed down versions of these hues. But what if I told you that there is a way to make every skin tone right every time? In this video, I am going to show you how, step by step. So don't go anywhere. Like we said before, just like there is no such a thing as a flesh tone, each individual skin should be created specifically depending on the surroundings, ethnicity, and light source. The light source here is top left, making the right in the shadows, which will prompt us to create the darker versions of the skin tones. Then the most important thing to consider after this is the color scheme. In this particular situation, the dress appears to be white and the light is very warm, which will point us towards these colors in the color wheel. Not the outside colors because they're very saturated, but the inside colors. These are the earth tones like burnt sienna, burnt umber, Naples yellow. And to tone this down, the straight direct complementary is ultramarine blue. So it's important that we have ultramarine blue to quiet down some of these colors, and also for the eyes because her eyes appear to be blue. And I'm adding Viridian to my pile because I want the background to be a little cooler than it is in here. And Viridian is the complementary of red, so I think the Viridian is a quiet green. It will complement beautifully the overall skin. I took the color out of the posterized photo and I isolated all of the values that I saw and I put them on the side so you can see all the 9 different values that we are going to work with. And in this one you can see all the 9 different color values that we're going to be using for the skin. I began by making my darks, and for that I grabbed burnt umber, which is going to be the main color. And think about burnt umber is a combination of basically red and blue. So there is a lot of ultramarine, blue, and yellow on that. All right, so it's more like orange and yellow and then blue. So I'm adding a little bit of cadmium orange, and I'm adding a little bit of mothered rose to not only make that a little bit more red, but also a tiny bit more pinky because we are talking about a woman. So I keep warming it with more red until I come up with a mixture that really looks like what we're looking at. And then of course I check it every time with my Holly to make sure that I have the right value. Now checking the skin tones all the time with the Hollies, I don't do it all the step of the way because it will drive me crazy, but I do it religiously at the very beginning. I mix every single one of them to make sure that I have as close to what I see as possible, because that makes my painting much easier later on. Now I'm mixing the absolute darkest darks which you see around the eyes and a tiny bit on right in the middle of the cheek by adding Viridian and Ultramarine blue. Those two tones are going to be the main ones that I'll be using for the darker tones. The skin tones of our subjects tells us many stories. For example, when we are blushing, our cheeks turn red, and when we are sick, our skin turns pale and yellow. There are many genetic and environmental factors that influence a person's skin. The important thing is to simplify. There are many ways and formulas to achieve realistic skin tones, and I have varied mine through the years. But we always should look for repetition and simplification. Photoshop can be a great tool to use to avoid mixing muddy skin tones because we can use the color picker to see and identify all the colors and values that we see and mix them accordingly, as I showed you previously. The best favor we can do to ourselves is forget about skin color as a genetic thing because there truly isn't such a thing. Paint manufacturers will sell you pigments that are labeled as skin colors, and I've never found them to be useful at all. Most are way too light and rosy. Also, the part of the face that is in shadow will be affected by the light that reflects whatever is around the subject, a blue rug, the green grass, etc. We must be very careful when we use photography that is overexposed because colors are washed out. The skin is always darker than what we see in most photographs. The shadows will always be lighter since photography flattens the image and exaggerates both the light and the dark areas. I continue working with my skin tones and I'm making them progressively lighter. And as you can see, the common denominator seems to be at this point raw sienna. I add quite a bit of raw sienna to warm and bring the yellow into the face. And when I need to make the rosy tones, then I keep adding rose madder and a tiny teeny bit of white. But notice how I've barely used my white. I only add a tiny amount each time because one thing to remember is white will alter your hue dramatically. It will cool it and it will change it into something else. So if you add too much white, then you're making your mixture chalky and muddy, and then you have to discard it and start all over again, and it's very expensive because then you're gonna have to keep using more pigment. So it's actually more economical too to just add white in tiny amounts at first, and if you need to add more, then you just add more. So it's better to add the yellows first: raw sienna, cadmium orange, Naples yellow. Naples yellow is pretty pasty because it has a lot of white in it. And that is the reason why I have Alizarin orange here. Because Alizarin orange is very transparent and it has a lot of tinting strength. So I can add a speck of it to any mixture and automatically will become more yellowish. And I didn't want to use any of the cadmium yellows, Windsor lemons or lemon pales, any yellow oversaturated like that, because those yellows will tend to make mixtures really green in a hurry. And there's a substantial amount of already Viridian and Ultramarine blue here. So think about it. If you add any yellow to that, then you change the mixtures to green. And that is the reason why I chose my main yellow to be raw sienna. A lot of painters will use yellow ochre instead, but I really don't like yellow ochre because it's really pasty and it's too thick, and in my opinion can get too muddy. So I favor transparent colors the most, because with transparent colors the mixtures are more delicate, and if you need a little bit more opacity, you just either add a little speck of white or just make sure that some of your colors there are opaque enough to compensate for that. And that is the reason why I have a cadmium orange here in this palette, because it's very opaque, and cadmium orange will really warm anything in a hurry. I continue making the skin tones lighter, and I'm checking every time with my Holy. And I know this, like I said before, is a very tedious process, and it may make you want to skip this step, but you will thank yourself later if you don't, because painting, once you create these beautiful tones and they are the exact tones that you want, will make painting much easier later on. And there's nothing more frustrated than having to keep mixing tones and applying them and taking them out and apply them some more, taking them out, only because we didn't want to spend the necessary time to make them right from the beginning. It's important to consider that art is a very slow experience. We need to slow down and really think and analyze what we're seeing, and be willing to take the time to translate that into a reality that we can put into the canvas. We should make less art, but with more intention. We should really go deep with the ideas that we have, and let thoughts marinate in our head, and don't feel the need to go there and paint at every second unless we have really decided what we're going to do, which has nothing to do with the fact that sometimes we change our mind halfway through a painting and we want to paint something else, and that's perfectly fine, or we want to take the painting in another direction. The two are not mutually exclusive, but still it's important to have a plan, because failing to plan is really planning to fail. And I add more white now. I'm adding more white and getting into the lightest areas of the face, and notice how I'm working my way there. And I started with the very darks just because I knew I didn't have to use any white, because white will get you in trouble in a hurry. Like I was telling you early, that way you want to wait until the end, and the lightest lights obviously are going to be the ones that are the most opaque, therefore have the most white, because the white we use in titanium white is very opaque. And if we work our way towards the lights, then by the time we get there, our lights will be vibrant. They will not be chalky, and we will know exactly the colors that we have to mix into them to make them interesting. That way all the mixtures will be subtle and grayed down. And speaking of grayed down, notice that I only use my gray once, and usually I'll use them more, but the reason why I didn't this time, even though I have them in every palette, is because I started with burnt umber, and burnt umber is not a pure pigment. Burnt umber is inside the color wheel, so burnt umber is already pretty muted. Therefore, if we start with burnt umber, all the other colors will be muted as a result. And that I started my mother lode with that. If you enjoyed this video, Please take a moment to like and subscribe so I'll be encouraged to keep posting content like this. Each video takes me a long time to make, and there's a lot of work that I put into it, not just making it, but editing it. But if I'm helping you in your journey, then it's all worthwhile.